Hi, everyone. Bob Burg back with another episode of Go Giver Influencers. Today's episode is handling objections influentially. And what a wonderful guest we have with us today that's going to help us learn to do just that. You know, since the days of old, when people first started selling to other people, objections have been the bane of most salespeople's existence. I can imagine back in the cave person days, once fire was discovered, some entrepreneur came up with the idea of manufacturing and selling pre-made fireplaces to cave dwellers. Okay, so the salesperson probably went in and they were hit with objections. No need. We rub hands together, nice and warm, right? Okay, that was one. Will never work. We'll burn house down. Maybe pet dinosaur will get too close, get hurt. And then there's there's the standby. Must think about it with mate. We'll get back to you soon, right? I mean, well, here's the thing. Times have changed, but not that much. Today, objections are still the bane of most salespeople's existence. And if you've been in sales for a week, you've probably heard all the objections or most of the objections you're ever going to hear. If you took a training course, read a book, listened to an audio, you heard about the objections, you were taught how to answer them, you rehearsed, you learned how, you went into your sales presentations, you got the objections, you answered them perfectly, and the person still didn't buy. And you couldn't really figure out why, but here's what it probably was. You probably gave the perfect response to the objection that really wasn't. Because many times the objection you hear is simply the manifestation of the true objection. And the prospective customer may not even know themselves what that is. Can objections be overcome? I don't think so. And here's why. Because if to overcome an objection, you've got to overcome the person. And people don't want to be overcome. It's like being convinced. It's like being conquered. No, I don't think we can overcome objections. What we can do is we can work correctly and appropriately within the context of the actual objection in order to partner with the prospective customer and work through and advance the sale and eventually complete the sale, helping them to attain the value they need, want, and desire. And that's what we're going to learn how to do today. My great friend, and guess what? I didn't lose it. Somehow thought I lost his introduction. My great friend, Jeff Shore, is a 30-year sales veteran who's seen and done it all. Frontline sales, sales management, corporate sales executive, trainer, author, and speaker. His specialty is in the area of buying psychology. His philosophy, learn how the buyer wants to buy, then reverse engineer your sales presentation to make it easy for them to do just that. I love that. Jeff is also host of the popular podcast, The Buyer's Mind, available on iTunes, YouTube, or at jeffshore.com. Where's that terrific book of his? He's the author of 7 books on sales, a number of bestsellers. His latest is Handling Sales Objections. Love the subtitle. 8 reality-based techniques for tackling tough objections. This is a book, as you can tell, by the way, very small, very tiny. Okay, you can read it in just a little bit, but you won't want to read it in just a little bit. You'll want to eat this entire thing up. You want to digest it. You will want to study this. This little booklet should be not in the bookshelf. It should be on the desk of every sales professional. It's that good. He now speaks throughout North America to thousands and thousands of people a year, holds a yearly event. This guy, he's top. On a personal note, I really consider Jeff Shore to be one of the elite speakers, trainers, and practitioners in terms of sales. He also happens to be a really, really great guy. Jeff, welcome, my friend.
Bob, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Although I have to tell you, not to correct the great Bob Burg, but you missed one of the objections from the caveman. It was the whole, oh, you charge 3 spears for fire stick, too much money. Yeah, so we got to make sure we get that one out there too. Yeah.
That's right. And you bring up a great point because, I can't afford it doesn't mean they necessarily can't afford it. It means they perceive the value as being here and the price as being here.
Yeah.
If it costs 4 spears and they see the value of this new fireplace being 1 spear, they can't afford it.
Yeah.
Good, right?
Well, there's so many aspects to the price objection. Right? Listen, in some cases, maybe they do have the money and they can afford it, and they might even think that it's priced right, but their value paradigm says, no, fire is only worth 2 spears. And so, it's the same thing if I'm saying, no, insurance only costs me this much, or a car only costs me that. This is outside my price paradigm. And so sometimes it's just a shifting of what a customer thinks that they should have to pay in the first place that's going to bring about the objection. But like so many different objections, and as you mentioned in the introduction, Bob, in so many of the objections, if we don't fully understand the core nature of why that person's bringing it up, we're going to have one heck of a time trying to deal with that objection.
Okay, so define an objection then as you see it, Jeff, because I gave a 30,000-foot view. How do you define an objection?
Yeah, I think it's really actually quite simple. I think anytime that we're shopping for anything, quite frankly, we have this ideal in mind for what we're looking for. And we go out thinking, this is what I want, and it's got these features at this price and this time, and I've got that all in mind. And then I go out there shopping and I find out, well, hold on a second, what I want is up here, and what I perceive that I can get is down here. So there's a gap between the ideal in my mind and the actual that I see as one of my choices. And the gap between the actual and ideal, that's where the objection is. The objection is simply the gap between what I really, really want and what I think I might have to settle for. And handling that objection is all about figuring out how to close that gap.
Okay, and so first, you reframe objections anyway into buying signals. What do you mean?
Well, if you think about it, I mean, look, Bob, you and I have been around the sales world for a long time, and when you look at typical sales behavior, when we're out shopping, all right, whether you're buying a car or a home or a mattress or whatever it is, you have in your mind what you were looking for. And if, let's suppose that you're out shopping for a car and you want to have a car that is gray, not black, not white, gray. And you absolutely insist on gray because you had a white car, you didn't like it. You had a black car, you didn't like it. You're absolutely only going to buy gray. You go to a dealership, and all the dealership has are cars that are black or white. So you're going to look and you're going to say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. I only want gray. I'm out of here. That's a deal killer. But if I'm still standing there saying, boy, you know what? I kind of would prefer gray and all you have is black or white. Is that a deal killer? And I would say not yet, at least, because if it's a deal killer, normal buyer behavior is bye-bye.
Right.
There's a deal killer, they walk. So by virtue of the fact that a customer is still there talking to you is a strong indication that this is not a deal killer. It is simply a deal pauser, and then it becomes a cry for help. Look, this is my ideal. This is what I perceive as your actual. You got to help me fill that gap because I can't get there on my own.
So does that tie into what you say the biggest mistake is that salespeople make then? It's the mindset, which leads to, the bad mindset, mind strategy. Explain that.
Yeah, well, listen, I don't think it's any different than when you look at the two characters in your most recent book, the Go-Giver Negotiator. When you look at the two characters, they started the process with mindsets that were off, and it was the mindset that had to shift before anything else took place. And I think that that's true in life in general and certainly in sales. And so what we find here is that there are a couple of damaging mindsets that salespeople have when they hear an objection. One damaging mindset is the idea that, I should be afraid of this for some reason, and they flinch a little bit and therefore validate that the customer's concern is valid, or they jump to a conclusion. where, oh, I've heard this objection before, and now they're trying to rush to solve the problem when the problem doesn't really exist. This is what you were talking about in the introduction.
Okay, so I want to now look at something you alluded to when we first began speaking, and ask you to unwrap this, because I've seen salespeople do this, and I know I've done this. And when I read it in your book, I thought about some of the times I've done that. And this is, we almost think we have to bring the customer the perfect solution. So when they're giving us those objections, the white or the gray or the black or the, what have you, it's like, oh no, and we almost try to find some way we can please them 100%, but we can't. But here's what you're saying. We don't really have to. That's okay, because why?
Yeah, I think I'm sure, because you've dealt so much in the customer care landscape, Bob, that the word perfect probably just scares the life out of you just a little bit, because it simply does not exist, right? So the idea that if we're trying to find the perfect solution, or if we tell our customers we want to find you the perfect solution, you're really going to be setting them up for disappointment. I think that we have to take the word perfect out of the vocabulary and insert the word best. Here's the way that I look at this. If you watch even one episode of the HGTV show House Hunters, you've seen it. If you've seen one episode, you have absolutely seen them all. And they all start the same way, right? Bob and Jennifer and their 6 kids have outgrown their 2-bedroom apartment. Bob and Jennifer are looking for 8 bedrooms, 4 baths, 3,800 square feet on 5 acres, walking distance to the beach, and their price point is $185,000. And so whatever ridiculous thing they're asking for at the front of the show is not anywhere close to what they buy at the end of the show. So what we're really doing here in the sales process is trying to figure out what matters most. It's what I refer to as the customer's hierarchy of values. And as we're going through that process of understanding the customer, there are the must-haves and the want-to-haves, and you've got to separate those out. If you understand the hierarchy of values, then you will get a good clue as to the way that the customer will actually make the decision and what they are willing to deal with and be able to accept, even though it may not be perfect.
Is this where the question, can you live with it, comes into play? And how powerful is that, Jeff? I put double stars next to it. I thought that was so powerful.
Yeah, it really is. If you're looking at it, listen, every customer is going to tell you everything they want. It's the episode of House Hunters, right? Everybody's going to tell you, I want this and I want this. And they're going to give you a long list. And if you're not careful, you're going to get discouraged, because you're going to go, I don't have that. There's just no way that I've got all that in my bag of tricks here. But if you're stopping from time to time and asking the customer, is that a must-have or a want-to-have? And we're trying to separate out, understand the hierarchy of values, because at some point somebody's going to say, boy, I'm really not thrilled about this feature, this attribute, whatever it is. And I might have to look at it and say, okay, we found all of this that works right. So let me ask you, if everything else is right, is this something that you can live with? And I think you're going to find very, very frequently that a customer's going to say, well, yeah, I don't love it, but I suppose I can live with it, which is all you're talking about. As you said, so we're not trying to eliminate the objection. We're just trying to neutralize it. We're just trying to get that customer to understand what matters most.
Does that take a bit of courage for the new salesperson to ask that question the first couple times, Jeff?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question and a really, really good point. There is that sense. I think if we can separate something out here that's really, really important, going back to the mindset for just a moment, and that is that people don't reject people in the sales process. They reject concepts. If they rejected the person, they're probably going to do that right away. But if you're a good person, if you're at Shore Consulting, we teach, if you are coffee worthy, that is the type of person that your customer would just simply want to have a cup of coffee with. If you're that person, if the customer rejects, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting a concept, and we have to be able to separate that out if we want to keep our own head on straight.
Okay, I want to talk to you about, and by the way, again, I want to, before we get too far through, because we're about halfway through, I want to make sure to let you know about Jeff's book again, Handling Sales Objections, 8 reality-based techniques for tackling tough objections. And as I said at the beginning, in case you're just joining us, this is a book that should not be in your library. This is a book that should be on your desk and read over and over and over again and studied over, and make this, if you're a sales manager, sales leader, this should be one of those points where every week have one of your salespeople teach on a different one of these topics. It's really that powerful. I know Kathy is has put the URL in there for the book and Jeff's website, jeffshore.com. He has a great podcast, The Buyer's Mind. He holds events, big events every year, but he is a legend in terms of the speaking, sales training. I did a program for a group of home builders, and all you heard was Jeff Shore says, and Jeff Shore did this, and we do it Jeff Shore's way, and they're very big, and there's a good reason for it. Jeff, here's a question. Allie Westbrook asks, I once was taught that I should ignore objections until the customer brings it up multiple times. That doesn't sound right to me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Ali, your instincts are absolutely right. Whoever came up with this stupid idea should be taken behind the barn so we could just beat the daylights out of them. It's a stupid thing when you look at it, in my frank opinion. I've heard this before. It's not a rejection until the customer brings it up 3 times. And it's like, I don't know how you know every single customer that well. Now, look, I'm not suggesting that every objection is a deal killer. We were just talking about that. But there's no doubt about it. In a strong relationship and a trusting relationship, you don't ignore people when they bring up a concern. You wouldn't do that with your friend or your family member or somebody that you care about. So why would you do it in the sales process? I think you're asking for trouble. I don't think I'm going to get a disagreement from you on that, Bob.
No. And, the person who teaches that is the same person who also teaches ABC, always be closing.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, great question. Another question, Emily Leonard. I always struggle with we want to think about it objection. We're going to save that one till the end. And Jeff does a great job in the book of explaining this, and on some of his videos. Make sure you also, and I get your emails. Is it on your emails that I subscribe to every week that I get your videos? Because I'm always tweeting.
You just hop on jeffshore.com. We put out a video email or a video newsletter every Saturday morning, and it's always got some little tidbit on there to help along those lines.
Dr. Robert Cialdini, in his wonderful book, Influence, Science and Practice, talks about social proof, which basically says that people make decisions they're more likely to make decisions based on people who are like them have decided. Okay. And you talk about this and how to utilize this and why it's so important. Explain, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, obviously this is so much up your alley, Bob. When we look at referrals, I mean, referrals are based on the principle of social proof and the idea that people do what people like them are inclined to do. And so when it comes to helping a customer work through an objection, it's one thing for me as a salesperson to say, well, here's what I think about that. But you're the salesperson. I'm the cynical customer. That might actually turn them off a little bit, because do you really get a vote if you're the salesperson, or do you need a vote if you're the salesperson? The real vote comes to the people who have already had that objection, bought anyway, and are very happy that they did. This is why there's another technique that gets taught out there a lot called the feel, felt, found technique. I know how you feel. Others have felt the same way, and they found that. Now, listen, I'm not sure that we have to lead with, I know how you feel. I'm not sure that salespeople always do know how somebody feels when they're actually thinking about parting with a lot of money to get something that's not exactly what they wanted. But I think we can extricate ourselves as salespeople out of that if we look at it and say, the customers who have already done this, the customers who have actually gone through, made the commitment, and written the check, let me tell you what they say, because theirs is the voice that really counts. I think you add credibility when you take yourself out of that and just tell the story. And so I want to encourage you, if you're a salesperson and you get a common objection, and we all do, go talk to the people who have already purchased and ask them the question, what put you over the edge, and what are you thinking now? And what they're going to say is, it's no big deal. I love it because of this, this, and this. And that becomes now your story.
Yeah, that's great. I always love what Joe Polish says, which we can paraphrase for this. What other people say about you, or we could say about your product, is infinitely more believable than what you say about you or about your product. So let them say it.
Love that guy.
Yeah. Isn't he great?
Yeah.
Question from Jane K. Jane. We are going to get to her question in just a moment. It's a good one. But I want to ask you first, because this was one of my very, very favorites of a whole lot of very, very favorites. Um, Rather than trying to overcome, so we're, of course, because we can't overcome anyway, and you're the same way with me, it's not a matter of overcome, working with, but rather than try to overcome the objection, instead have the customer overcome their own objection. They can, that it's okay, let them overcome it instead of you overcoming it. So how do we create that? I loved that.
Yeah, it starts with a mindset where we are not trying to see sales as something that I do to someone, but something that I do for and with someone. So as I'm coming alongside, as I am a partner in helping that customer to accomplish their goal, then there's no reason I have to come up with all the answers. And sometimes it helps a customer to visualize what their life is going to look like if they're living with this objection. And so we ask them, what would you do? Assume you already owned this. What would you do? Assume you had already made the decision. How would you make this work? And it's a very, very powerful way to get the customer's imagination going. And so let me give you the psychology behind this. When we think about what we know right now is concrete. But when we think about the future, it's abstract. When I think about handling an objection, when I think about it as a customer, I'm going to buy, but I've got this objection. It's not perfect. What is that going to be like? That abstract is so fuzzy and so unclear to me that it gets in the way and it freezes me up where I am right now. But if I ask the customer, suppose you already own this, you had already made this decision, just move into the future and tell me, how do you deal with this? What would you do if you already owned this? Now what they have to do is they have to place themselves into the future. And when they do that, their future becomes much more concrete. I'm not saying that it's going to work, but boy, if they come up with a solution, I promise you it'll be far more effective than anything that you could come up with.
Yeah, you've transferred ownership.
Yes.
Of the situation. It's theirs. And if they, I just think this is such a wonderful, respectful way of helping the prospective customer come up with their own solution. Jane K. Jane, whose name I love, by the way, asked, what do I do with an objection that just can't be overcome? In other words, which of course we're not overcoming anyway, but we'll still use that vernacular on this. My customer needs a feature that we just don't offer. And Jeff, before I throw it to you, I'm going to say that that actually is, in a sense, not an objection as much as a condition, because it's not, if that really is, if that's really true, that it is something they just absolutely, they need something, they want something, you just don't have it. It's not a matter of imperfect but good, but they just don't have it. And but go ahead. What's your thought?
Yeah, look, I think this comes back to a really, really important point that we probably have not spent enough time on yet. So I think that this leads us into it perfectly. Whenever you hear an objection, I don't care what it is or what the nature of it is, the first response of salespeople, we love to solve problems, right? As salespeople, we love to be problem solvers. And we walk through the sales process and we see a problem arise and we just shoot it down and blow it in the barrels and move on to the next problem, right? But that's a problem. That's an issue. That's jumping too quickly to what the issue is. Now, you may get it right sometimes, but the problem is you don't understand two things. You don't understand the exact reason behind the objection, and you don't understand the severity of the objection. So we have to train ourselves as sales professionals that whenever we hear an objection, our auto response has got to be, tell me more.
Yes, good.
Well, why is that the case? Talk to me. Come on, give me more. Tell me more. Now, the weak-minded salesperson is going to say, I don't want to know more. It's an objection. And that's going to get you into trouble. You want to look at it and say, come on, bring it. Tell me. This is what counselors make a living off of the phrase, tell me more about that. Because
right.
I can start to get into the depth behind it. So if I'm looking at it, let's say I'm selling homes and somebody says, boy, I really need to have a home with a master bedroom and full bathroom downstairs, right? Now I can look at it and go, I don't have one of those, goodbye. Or I could look at it and say, tell me why. Great, tell me why. Well, my mother lives with us and she can't do stairs at all. She has to have a full bedroom. Well, listen, if I don't have a bedroom and a bathroom downstairs, that's what we call a non-sale. And this, I simply don't have it. So I've got to, this is where we separate, is it a must-have or a want-to-have? But I think the key here is that you have to ask the first and foremost the question, why is that objection is what is the nature of that? So getting back then to Jane's question, if you don't have something that they absolutely have to have, then that person is not a buyer for you.
No.
And I'm not going to lose any sleep over not selling to someone who couldn't buy it anyway.
And refer them to someone who has,
exactly.
what they have.
Absolutely.
Because it's all about, them. And this is why I just love what you do, Jeff, because in all your books, and I think I've read just about all your books, the respect you have for serving the buyer is just immense. And I just love it. And that's always, because that's the kind of person you are too. That's your character. And
I think we share that. You and I both have a strong distaste for the customer as a victim of the salesperson, or a target, or the prey of a salesperson. There is that school of thought, that mindset that's still out there. As long as I'm on this planet, I will strive to undo that level of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Okay, so now let's get to the question.
Sure.
Someone says, and it might be a couple. It might be, if it's a business to consumer type of product. It might be two business partners or two or more decision makers when it's a business to business sale. But Jeff, we've got to think this over. And this is really a bane to many people. It's hard for many people to get around, and we can see the reasons for it, and yet there's a solution to this to be able to really take this and help this person make the best decision for them. So I'm just going to give the floor to you. You talk about it so beautifully and do such a great job with it.
Well, first of all, let's undo what we've been taught in the past. The customer says we need to think about it, and we've been taught that our auto response is, well, what do you need to think about? And it's almost like fighting stance right from the very beginning. Let's do battle over this one. And again, I would rather see the salesperson as an advocate, as a partner, as a trusted advisor along these lines. Let's back into this, Bob. Let's look at why somebody's going to say we want to think about it in the first place. And the fact of the matter is that when you're making a purchase decision, it doesn't even matter what the product is. When you're making a purchase decision, there are actually a lot of things to think about. So let's Bob, you throw something out there. Just anything at all that somebody's going to be shopping for. I'm going to follow your lead. Just pick something.
Well, it could be a car, I guess.
Let's go with a car. Okay. So when I'm thinking about a car, I'm looking at it and I'm going to say, what are all of the different things that I have to think about when I'm thinking about the car? So I have to think about the way that I drive, what I drive now, what's wrong with my car. I have to think about what I'm looking for, the features that matter most, the color, the shape, what I want that car to do by the time I'm done. But I also have to think about some of the more subconscious things. What does the car say about me, and what is the value that I place on cars? And then I've got to get into how much I trust car dealerships or car salespeople and how I get into the negotiation. So when we think about the decision to buy a car, it is not one decision, it's 1,000 decisions. And so no matter what you're selling, your customer's going through the same thing. There are going to be a long series of decisions that need to be made. And one of the reasons that I'm backing into it this way is that if a salesperson is not inviting the customer to make decisions all throughout the process, then what's going to happen here is by the time they get to the end of this conversation, and the salesperson says, what do you think? Did we find it? Do you want to make this yours? If I've not made, as a customer, a series of decisions all along the way, now what I have to do is I have to, in one fell swoop, make this ginormous decision comprised of 1,000 decisions at one time. And that is cognitive strain. That is going to hurt my brain. And I'm going to say I need to think about it. And I'm not lying. I really do need to think about it. And if you looked at it and said, well, what do you need to think about? If I'm being honest, I would probably say, well, I need to think about what I need to think about. I mean, that's true. That's what they're saying. And so I would suggest that the first thing here is that if you're regularly getting people who say, I need to think about it, you have to ask yourself, did I invite them to make small decisions all along the way? It's as simple as I'm walking through the car buying process. So did we find the right color for you? This is very important. Did we find the right color for you? Cool. Now in the customer's mind, put a bow on it, set it aside. We don't have to talk about color anymore. And a little bit later on, is this the right features package? Did we get Cool. Put a bow on it, set aside. I don't need to think about it anymore. And we're doing the customer a tremendous favor because they're thinking about it all throughout the process. What we want to do is to keep something very important in mind. It's a psychological shortcut that every customer takes. And the shortcut is this: easy equals right, or simple equals right. The simpler something seems to me, the righter it feels to me. And it's simpler to be able to buy the product a step at a time all the way through, rather than wait until the end and make this one ginormous decision. So I would suggest that we are probably hearing way too many "we need to think about it" objections than we should. And if we go back and invite the customer to make a series of decisions throughout the process, we'll dramatically cut down on the "we need to think about it."
Yeah, and I think the better the discovery at the beginning to really know what they need, want, and desire. I think the less that's gonna happen. You said you made a great statement that I have tweeted a number of times, and I think I put in a new manuscript that, and correct me if I get this wrong, salespeople all over the world are consumed with solving the problem without first knowing the question.
Yeah. It drives me crazy. It drives me crazy when I'm a customer. It drives me crazy when I watch salespeople do it. Again, this is where the counselor and sales counselor comes into play. You wouldn't walk through the door and say, "Counselor, I'm depressed," and have that counselor say, "Well, here, take some drugs."
Right, exactly.
Talk to me. Tell me about it. What is really going on?
Yeah. And, at that point of having to think about it, that's, really the counselor can be so helpful just in helping to specify and helping them see what the actual thing is that's kind of still on their mind. And I just love how you approach that in the book. And so make sure, again, that you get this, Handling Sales Objections, 8 reality-based techniques for tackling tough objections, jeffshore.com. Check out everything Jeff on that site, including his podcast, The Buyer's Mind, his whole group of books, where you can find him on social media. I know Kathy's been posting this, and when this comes out on YouTube, after we do the post-production part, we'll have all that in the actual description. So, Jeff, I want to thank you so much for being my guest. As always, you are a wellspring and a wealth spring of information.
Bob, thanks for all you do to make salespeople better. I think you and I just share that idea that when you go in with your own agenda, you're in trouble before you get started. But when you put your customer first, magical things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. This has been another episode of Go Giver Influencers. We'll be back next week from Orlando this time, because we'll be doing a training and certification of some of our new certified Go-Giver speakers. So thankfully, Kathy will be there helping with the technology part. So we'll actually be able to do it. So we'll look forward to seeing you. It'll be a different background, though, because it will be in a hotel meeting room. Until then, I wish everybody a great week. I'm Bob Burg. Enjoy. Make it a fantastic day. Thank you so much.